And hello, welcome, each and every one of you, on this blessed day of merriment, or the opposite of that, whatever the opposite of blessed and merry is, you know. Okay, so there's a lot to do in this world of Diablo. Diablo Espanol. I'm gonna go for health for a little bit. Right here. And let's make more incense of every type. 10 each. 10 of each. Chorus of War. These incenses give me resistances and they kind of fill in my gaps. Soothing spices for even more resist all and everything. Boost my armor a bit too, even though I'm over capacity. Alright, so let's see what's available on the map. I'd like to knock out this Tree of Whispers. There's a world boss in 15 minutes. Okay, let's knock out the Tree of Whispers combo mixed with the Helltide. Helltide combo mixed with the Tree of Whispers. Alright. And I can get some Living Steel, which is used to spawn Grigori, one of these endgame layer bosses, to get these mythic items, which is the endgame rotation. And whenever there's a Realmwaker, like in 4.5 minutes, I have to stop what I'm doing and go knock it out. So let's do what I can in these 4.5 minutes. Let me zip on through here. We have this ritual. There's one, there's gonna be 2 more. Kill a bunch of a certain enemy type. And I'll try to open up these boxes as I move through, so I don't have too many before leaving. There you go. Very nice. Pick up these motes. All these elites have stuff on them. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. I'm heading toward the harvest turn-in. I'm sure I'll get everything else taken care of as I move between A and B. So Helltide means there's a certain section of the map that starts to become invaded by the forces of heck. You see, the veil between worlds gets all thin. And hell starts to poke on through. Fire rains from the sky and scores of demons start to erupt from the earth. Giant worms. So basically, you have a normal area plus a bunch of other creatures. So it's just an increased monster density for a time period, which is great for XP. But I think it's a bit harder than standard content. Just go around here. A tiny bit harder, so a bit more XP. And all this extra loot stuff. Let's knock out this event here. We have 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes. Okay, portal invasion. In this event, we have to destroy these portals when they open up. Each one has a certain amount of life, so it's sort of a challenge to destroy this stuff quickly. At the very end, there'll be a boss type. We're at 5 out of 7. Everything's fine. There it is. 1.9 billion gold. Greater chest. That's all done. Easy peasy. Heading on through. Nice and quickly. Keep on bouncing around. This damage situation really is tough. To try to keep getting more damage. Once you figure it out, it's a dramatic difference every so often. You can double or triple your damage. You know what I mean? Like from 200 or quadruple. From 250 million to a billion. Which is a lot. Okay, we have something else here. Alright. I found this corpse. These grim favors which are scattered across the map. this long-term gain in the background the whole time. We go over here really quick and head to the Tree of Whispers. Right now, these bad guys are coming in first. I have to take care of it. No peace. Happy Halloween. The Hellborn. 1.4 billion. Alright, let's head on back down to the tree. This is where we turn in these Grim Favors. Every 10 Grim Favors. Get ourselves a nice goodie bag with a bunch of stuff in it. Different resources, gold, gem fragments, boss summoning parts, items, of course, and actual XP. I can choose between, that was three random things. It was helm, boots, and something else. And one of the items was a legendary version. So this one has even more. Check it out. A lot of stuff. See? A lot of stuff, right? That's a lot of stuff. From doing some tasks that you might have already been doing. If you do the right tasks in the right order, oh boy. And there we go. Let me head back to the spot I was just at. I just sold all that stuff. I marked it as junk and sold it to that vendor by the portal. We're heading back to where I was so I can knock out these other tasks. I have exactly no time. It has begun. So I can hopefully quickly head to the... Oh my gosh. A moment of peace over here. A moment of peace. Give me a darn second. Oh my gosh. Pretty please. I'm trying to get to this Realmwaker thing. I keep getting attacked. A second. Oh my gosh. Stop it. Leave me alone. Well, maybe I can't do the Realmwaker. Alright, let me just open up this box and then head across the map here. Oh, goodness. Hey, hey, Franklin. I can tell that you're looking for a game to play, right? I think that's what's going on. You recently got yourself a PC, and you're looking for a good game to play and potentially stream? Is that what you're trying to do? Okay, I missed it. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Let's go up here and knock this out. I think this game is actually really good, okay? This is a cross... So in terms of streaming and so forth and so on, there's lots of stuff to do. Lots of stuff to do in this game. Lots of long-term growth and everything. And how you build your character is what matters. There's lots of different ways to build your character. Lots of really cool loot and everything. It does have this camera angle. I'm invisible right now, so you can't see me. But, it's really good. Okay. The gameplay is nice, and it's very satisfying, and it's cross-platform, console and computer. You can play it on your big screen, you can play it with a controller or keyboard and mouse, you know? Even though it's originally intended for keyboard or mouse, it's been many years since the adoption of Diablo and controller. A long time, since Diablo 3. Diablo 3 was sort of made for console and mine. It gives you WoW vibes because it's made by the same company. It's made by the same people, you know? For example, here is the in-game store. For example, Warcraft Legends. Come get your Arthas skin for the one true... You know what I mean? Oh no! Game over. I gotta restart the game now. You only have... That's the main problem here. You only have one life. It didn't take that long. I was only level 270... I'm joking. I'm just joking. But in terms of the camera angle, this is the camera angle. It's sort of like a thing, you know. That's never going to change, probably, because that's part of this genre. It's an isometric camera angle. You know, there's a whole family. That's why Baldur's Gate 3 has this camera angle. You can't play Baldur's Gate 3 in first person, but you can kind of change the camera angle and rotate the camera around and so forth. But it still has this isometric at an angle overhead, you know, as the crow flies thing. Yeah, I was doing hardcore at first, yes. There's a hardcore mode. But, you know, in terms of progression and everything, that's more of a challenge. And because it's a challenge, you have to play it really carefully, because death is sort of around the corner. I was just standing still looking at the in-game store in this hostile battleground, so, you know. But, you know, you get used to this camera angle rather quickly. You're playing within this domain from the top down. It's like saying God of War looks amazing, but man, I wish it was first person, right? I sure wish God of War and Assassin's Creed were first person. That'd be so much better. Would it though? It'd be a different kind of game. I wish Mario Brothers 3 was first person. It looks great though, but I don't know about the sideways, you know, side-scroller camera angle. That's the whole point of Mario Brothers. It's a platformer game with platforms with the camera at the side. You get used to it, you know? And they made Super Mario 64 and so forth, and Super Mario World where you could have the camera behind the person, but I don't think there's ever been a first-person Mario Brothers. You know? You're stuck here with this angle. You think they came up with... I don't think they came up with... Well... You think they came up with this camera angle to keep up with the lag and so forth and so on? Well, this is going back to Diablo 1 had this camera angle. And, like Warcraft 2 is Simon's Quest, King's Quest. There's a bunch of these games that have this top-down angled... It's like a genre thing. It's not so much about performance. Back in the day, you had a bunch of games that had this top-down angled thing. It helped performance now. Sure, but I don't think that's the reason. I think it's the reason because it's the genre. And it wouldn't be as much Diablo if you had it. It still would, because now Diablo is like it's its own lore. It's like saying it's Warcraft, meaning Warcraft the RTS, Warcraft the MMO, Warcraft the lore. It's like DC versus Marvel. It's a whole world. Diablo meaning the world of Sanctuary, the Nephilim, the Primevals, you know, angels and demons, and the eternal conflict. All the stuff. It's the lore and the world and the existence of different classes. It could be any camera angle really at this point. You know? Yeah, And in terms of movement, if it were first person, you couldn't really do as much. Imagine if I could only see what's in front of me. I couldn't see what's behind me. And I couldn't just jump behind me like that and say, I want to jump right there. You know, I want to jump right behind this guy. You know, you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that. You know? You're clicking on something and saying, I want to go right there. There you go. Yeah. Did I Fallout 1 and 2? Yes. The whole thing where you have... Yes, yes. Yeah, like that. It's a whole genre of thing. You know? And then Fallout 3 was special because all of a sudden it became a 3D game. That's crazy. Yes. Here, I'm just going to open up one more box and I'll leave this zone. Because I want to give a little proper tour here. Give me a second. I want to give a proper tour. Let me get some more FlimFlam for a second. I'll give a proper tour. Because the game is really good. If you play through the campaign, there's a really good campaign with a ton of voice acting and some really good cinematics when you first get through it. You saw me do some stuff in hardcore mode, you know. I did the campaign through hardcore mode, but then this expansion also had another campaign. So right now I'm playing the expansion, which came out semi-recently. You know what I mean? Now, you are able to go first person in World of Warcraft, sort of. If you move the camera, like, right to yourself, you can kind of run. But it's not really made for first person mode, but you can you can sort of, if you zoom in far enough, you can submerge the camera into your own body. Alright, we're done here. So, this game has a bunch of different classes, a bunch of different builds. The overall point of Diablo is to make yourself have a nice character that is synergistic with its abilities and is able to do the harder stuff in the game and get the best stuff to be even better, you know? At first you might think it's just getting stronger to fight better, harder enemies, to then get stronger, to then fight harder enemies, to then get stronger, to then fight harder enemies forever. But there's a structure to it because it's actually kind of hard to get strong, in theory. It's okay to get kind of strong. It's hard to get really strong. I don't want to overwhelm you and then discourage you. These are all other players, you see? Other players. Other players. Other players. I don't want to discourage a person that doesn't know anything about Diablo. But right now, I'm tagging all my loot I don't want as junk. I'll sell it over here at this vendor. These different tabs here. Organized. This is my chest. This is like a cross-character chest with different tabs, you know, for organization long term. This is like all my good stuff. Good stuff. And then second place good stuff. And then good legendaries, which is different than these items. And then I have all these boss summoning parts of different variety. Boss summoning parts. To summon bosses, they drop through a variety of means. You have to summon these bosses like keys. Pretty cool. These special consumables. And then runes and gems. And I keep emptying out my pockets every time I come back. I dump off these extra consumables I'm not using in my current build. These extra boss parts I keep picking up. Make sure we're nice and clean with what I'm using. I put away these extra keys, destroy the ones I don't need. and I'm good to go. I'll break down these extra dungeon sigils. Yes.
May your road be filled with wonders.
So, the enemies drop loot. You pick up the loot. The loot could just be items, but then they also have special abilities, special factors. I guess I could explain by making a new character really quick. It might be easier to explain with a brand new character. Take you through the process, but that'll also take a second. So I'll give you a little intro. So, for example, I'll get some random item from this guy through this currency system. This is a rare item. You got this. This is a magic item. You know, it just says 84 life per second, whatever. It has resist all. It has poison resistance, so it's resistance to all elements like fire, cold, lightning, shadow, and poison, and poison resistance, which is great. That's what rings have. Rings have resistance on them. And then it has a little stat line. A rare item has another stat line. This one has damage. It says plus 22% overall damage. That's pretty cool. And critical strike chance. A chance to do double damage or whatever. A chance. It's not so much double damage. It's just more damage. And then there is another factor called critical strike damage that determines how much damage you do. And that's a different line. So these affix lines, like in Diablo, there's a variety of potential lines that could be there. You know? Because there's so many different lines, it's kind of hard to get exactly what you want. You see, a legendary item has another line. So now there's a third line. Now there's 3 affix lines, plus a legendary aspect for the item. See here. It says, Stinger now spawns a Pestilent Swarm at its target location, which deals 43% of Stinger's base damage per hit. Pestilent Swarms now last 100% longer. It's almost like Magic the Gathering, where you'll have a card that modifies other cards. You know? For every zombie you have on the field, every time they die, put a counter down. When the counters reach 5, add another zombie. Something like that. Now you have a zombie army. You know? This one over here, it says, Unlucky hit. You have a 28% chance for your skills to inflict Vampiric Curse. Enemies inflicted with Vampiric Curse are vulnerable. And Vampiric Cult, whatever, you know. Some weird ability. And there's a bunch of them. Okay? Every time that you break down a legendary item, you pull off its legendary aspect. And I'm reading off these percentages, but it's, for example, my ring says, hitting a vulnerable enemy has up to a 32% chance to reduce my evade cooldown by 5 seconds. Every stack of ferocity I have increases the chance by 3%. Spiritborn only. But it's really between 15 and 35%, which means this could be slightly better if I find another item that has that same aspect, but slightly better, and I break it down. But it's rare because you have to have an item that has that aspect and it has to be better. And it gets harder and harder because we're reaching the end of this tree here of potentiality. This is, right now, this one is 30 out of potential 32. This right here is 2145 out of 2288 potential. So I'm breaking down these items, in theory, to pull off their legendary aspect, or to get their raw materials at the blacksmith. You're also pulling off a cosmetic, you know? So the first time you're playing, you're unlocking a ton of cosmetics. Here, I'll show you my wardrobe. You unlock really cool cosmetics for your character based upon whatever the item look like, and the items look pretty cool with really good graphics. So check it out. Just activate another tab here, and then right here, check out these different helmets. Go default. Most of this stuff came from breaking down items. Isn't that like really nice? Oh yeah. It gives you a reason to get stuff. Yeah, Panther Man. Jaguar dude. I am of the wolf. Whoa. I have that? I have that? Well, what do you know? I'll wear that I know I had that. That's cool. Anyways. Yeah. But this one is from a really nice item. Rare. This one too. Ooh. So you break down items and you pull off their skin. Some of the stuff comes from the in-game shop or from the season pass. This right here came from one of the season passes, like this current one, and that one, and that one. This came from the expansion pre-order. That's pretty cool, huh? The Harmony of Ebenuaka. Not good enough. Cereals might, but that's not what I'm wearing. I'm a swashbuckler. That's kind of cool. I'll wear that. I'm a swashbuckler, you see? The Shroud of False Death, because that's what I'm actually wearing right now. This is from the season pass. You gotta wait a while before you pull this back out. It's too early, too soon. Too many people have it, you know? Too many people have it. I'll go for that swashbuckler thing. The Spiritborn has a bunch of this open chest situation for their armor. Gotta deal with it. Gotta deal with it. It's like a Tarzan situation. There you go. And got these different gloves and so forth and so on. Sure. Just like how the barbarian wears nothing but mini skirts. One. Right. Whatever. I'll wear this stupid helmet for a bit. Can I color this thing red? Probably could. Maybe. Well, the ears don't change, or the horns don't change, but everything else changes on it. Go blue. Oh. I'm not some seasoned pro in it though. Anyways, you got a bunch of these slots. You loot items. You break them down. You get the legendary aspects off of them to then place on other items, and you also unlock the cosmetic. I just wanted to show you the cosmetics really quick because it's really nice without having to pay for anything. There is an in-game shop. The items look really cool. I kind of pulled it up earlier. Wow. Jungle Cat. And there's this whole World of Warcraft thing I mentioned. Look, it's Garrosh Hellscream. Almost looks like an orc, you know, for the barbarian. And here's what's her name? Jaina Proudmoore.
That's a bold choice.
Jaina Proudmoore. Yeah. And yep, Lich King, Odon, Malfurion. Some random blood elf. There's some really good skins here. If this is the barbarian, wow, ridiculous. You gotta pay for that one. But the in-game stuff is also really cool. Look at this thing for the necromancer. Anyways, so you're able to take an item and then put one of those legendary aspects on it, which is cool. And there's lots of really, really awesome stuff that define your overall build. Your build, quote unquote, is defined by the combination of those legendary aspects and how they work with one another in conjunction with your skill tree. See, this got the skill tree, you got basic skills, core abilities, then some sort of movement thing, some sort of defense thing, some sort of utility thing, and then an ultimate ability, and then a key passive. That's what all the characters are like. They have basic, which is left click, core, which is right click, typically. And typically, basic generates a resource, and typically, the core spends the resource. Like this one costs vigor, because I am a Spiritborn. A barbarian, it costs fury, for example. And every class has something slightly different. Mana for the whatever. Yeah. And so forth and so on. Different skills and the different passives. These are passives on these little side branches. These are the main ability, and these are the modifiers for the main ability. Main ability, modifiers. And then this is the skill assignment. You can drag and drop them onto the thing after you activate them. And see, left click, right click, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 4 abilities plus left click and right click. That's what you're doing the whole time. And then you can see down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, left click, right click, health. And then my resource mana thing, my number of evade charges right here, right there, you see, my town portal icon, my mount icon, the number of potions I have, and my current status for different buffs and debuffs I have. Like it's telling me that my weapon needs to be repaired. See? It's saying that right now there is an XP buff because of this current event. And it's keeping track of my rune charges on the side, some other weird thing I'm doing, 2 abilities, and it's saying that my next eagle skill will do bonus damage, because that's what my item says. Or that's what my skills say. And so forth and so on. It gets rather complicated. There's also these other items, these unique items. These items you can't modify, and you can't pull the legendary aspect off. It's just they happen to have some really cool feature built into them, and you cannot separate it. So I couldn't pull this legendary aspect off of this item. It just is how it is, and you can't add something to it. And they're build defining, really good. This item right here, Scorn of the Earth, turns my evade into that soaring ability, where I'm teleporting around. So if I were to go over here and do the stuff while I'm talking to you. I'm just giving you a nice intro to the game here. So you're looting stuff, you get items, the items can have random legendary effects on them, and random stats, and you're looking for a variety of different stats, and some stats are better than others, you know, you got like life, and your key stats, dexterity, strength, intelligence, willpower, and so forth, that govern different average things, but then every class has a main stat that determines their overall skill damage. So for the Spiritborn, it's dexterity. For the rogue, it's dexterity. For the barbarian, it's strength. For the mage, it's intelligence, for example. So you have to have more of that and whatever the others. But then you also have a requirement for other stats as well. But gear can have that as a stat. It can have all stats. It can have pure armor, which is physical damage resistance. I already went over the elemental damage resistance, you know? And then you have other things like dodge chance and block chance, barrier generation, fortify generation, things like that. Other weird status effects like unstoppable, where you can't be crowd controlled for a certain amount of time, and movement speed, stuff like that. Okay. On the offensive side, there's like a critical hit chance, critical hit damage, raw damage percentage, vulnerable damage. There's conditional things like there's lucky hit chance for something to happen, like lucky hit chance to chill enemies. There's damage to chilled enemies, damage to burning enemies, damage to crowd-controlled enemies of any variety, damage to slowed enemies, to knock down enemies, every little variety, sort of, depending, maybe. but typically is damage to crowd-controlled enemies. And there's different ways to apply some sort of crowd control to them. Like right now, I'm pulling the enemies and knocking them down. That's two things that's happening to them. They're also getting shocked with the electricity, and they're getting poisoned right away. And I'm making them vulnerable. You can see their life bar is turning purple when I hit them, just for a second. And they take way more damage when they're vulnerable. And there's other conditions that apply. For example, after dealing damage to a vulnerable enemy, XYZ happens. That's sort of a thing that happens, you know? You gotta look out for. And every class has different abilities, you know? There's different ways to enhance the effect more than meets the eye. It's not just raw damage, raw damage, raw damage. It's creating some new effect out of the blue. Like I have a bunch of stuff going on here. My basic attack is this. But I'm really using this because if you see all this paragraph here, it has a nice side effect. It says, when I evade, I attack with Thunderspike along the way and make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. And because I have all these other effects piled up with evade, then I gotta use it. I'm not really using my basic attack. You hardly ever see me doing it. You know, if I were just to use this basic attack, check out what happens. Nothing. Compared to all this other garbage I have to do. My core ability is this. I'm sort of smacking the ground with my gorilla hands. So normally you would be hitting and then spending, and then hitting and then spending. I build up the resource and then I spend the resource. You know? But that doesn't work here. These guys are too strong. It'd be too slow and weird. Yes. You hit, you spend. Hit, 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 spend, spend, spend. Right? But in reality, this... it grants me a barrier, okay? You see how my life bar is purple and it's building up with purple? A barrier is sort of like a health shield that takes damage before you take damage. It's a layer of life on top of your life. You see it says barrier and then life? It builds up in percentage chunks from a variety of resources. My right click here and I have a passive that builds up automatically. And my soar builds up, like whenever I do this and land on things, it builds it up. And the goal is to have it maxed out. Like right here it's maxed out and it matches. It has to match my life. So now I have this whole cushion. I can see when it lowers. See it's lowering, lowering. Okay? But that's why I'm using this core ability. And because it has a big nice chunk of damage up in there. But as I showed you, I can't just smack the ground. It's not enough. Whenever I jump, it's pulling them in. And it's making them vulnerable. Without that, they're not vulnerable. See how they're not purple? If I make them purple first, then I can do a whole lot more damage. Purple first, and then boom, boom. So as I jump at them, I finish them off with my core and basic maybe. I sort of sprinkle in the other things. This ultimate ability does a lot of damage. It does that, you see. And my incense wore off, so I have to be kind of careful here. You know what I mean? It's rather complicated. I have a bunch of different abilities to choose from. You know? One of several basic, one of several core, and then all those other categories. I can choose something for some purpose. But you can't have everything. And that's the complex part. You can't have everything. There's only so many gear slots, only so many legendary effects can be active at once, and only so many skills can be active, and you only have 4 items here in your hotbar, and then 2, so only 6 abilities, You're trying to do as much as possible from as many sources as possible. The goal is to have as many things synergized as possible here. I'll quickly read off what's going on here. So my helmet and Dario's Visage, it's a mythic item, and it gives me upon a lucky hit chance, there's a chance to deal a big poison nova to all the enemies around me. A bunch of poison damage. Okay? Let's keep that in mind. And it increases my attack speed significantly, gives me a big chunk of poison resistance and life on hit. Okay? And a big chunk of attack speed and a big chunk of all stats. Awesome. I put some barrier generation gems in it, but it could be dexterity. But I'm trying to get this barrier up. My chest here is another mythic item. Very nice. This one has life and some stats, and the key here is I deal 566.1% damage on my next attack after entering stealth. That's a whole lot. And if I haven't dealt damage in the last 2 seconds, I enter stealth and gain movement speed. So pretty much whenever I'm out of combat, 2 seconds pass, and I run to the next group, I'm usually invisible. Unless it's a long chain, then it doesn't happen. But to make up for that, I'm using this rune word combination of Yule and Ner, N-E-R, where Yule, Y-U-L, it's the invocation or the ritual, whatever. And the condition is, after I cast a skill with cooldown 12 times, it will make me invoke the Rogue's Countering Concealment for 5 seconds, which makes me gain dodge chance, movement speed, unstoppable, and stealth. That's cool. So every 12 casts with my abilities, I'm turning invisible. And then in between combat, I'm turning invisible. And every time I break out of invisibility, I do a big old chunk of damage. Okay? And these gloves, they give me a huge lucky hit chance, which is a thing in Diablo 4. It's a weird thing how lucky hit chance works, okay? The items will say, like this helmet, it says, there's an affix line, it says lucky hit. Up to a 20% chance to trigger a poison nova that applies 21,400 poisoning damage over 5 seconds. So it says up to a 20% chance. Okay? But that is combined with the individual skill's lucky hit chance. This skill here has a lucky hit chance of 50%. So every other hit equals a lucky hit registry, or registration. And then every 5 of those, every 10 hits pretty much equals the poison nova. But then that's modified by my overall lucky hit chance, which gets stacked on top of whatever individual ability's lucky hit chance might have. And every individual ability has different lucky hit chance. This one has 68% chance. Counterattack right here has 68% chance. The Hunter has 34% chance. Thunder Spike has 50. Crushing Hand has 56% chance. Okay, but that stacks on top of my actual lucky hit chance. Right now, it's really high, 126% chance, which is insane. Normally, it'd be a 10% chance or some weird thing. But these gloves, they're called the Fists of Fate for a reason. They give you a huge chunk, and I happen to luck out, and this is a greater affix line. You see how that affix line is white and has a star next to it? You can get an item that has a maxed out stat that's a bit more than normal. You're going for here. And the key factor of this item is that it says your attacks randomly deal between 1% and 290 or 300% of normal damage, and that's what you're trying to go for. Plus, it activates all of your other lucky hit chance abilities all the time, as opposed to once every 5 hits. It's all the time. It's every hit, pretty much. Especially if you're hitting multiple times per second. If you're waiting for something to happen, it's going to be happening constantly with these gloves on. And it has other cool stuff, whatever. These pants, resist all, max life, dexterity, barrier generation, which increases the percent from every source. So if something says it gives you 20% of your max life, you're really getting more than that. If an ability says, for example, if this ability right here says, Soar grants 49% life as barrier for 1.5 seconds, it's really more than that. Basically. That's what barrier generation does. And I learned it's pretty important to keep that barrier active because damage never gets through. As long as the barrier is active, you know. As long as my life bar is purple, I'm good to go. And the legendary effect I have on this pant, it says Soar casts Vortex. And these boots say evade is now Soar. So every time I evade, press the space bar, I lunge, I now soar in the air and crash down. Whenever I crash down, it creates a vortex, which pulls enemies in toward me. And vortex is a skill, you see. And because I have you're able to add the passive on your skill tree, even though I'm not using the skill on my hotbar, because it's being activated through some other means, it still gets applied. And it says, while I have an active barrier, which I do, the vortex now does 300% more damage and knocks down enemies for 3 seconds. That's cool. You see what I mean by the whole synergy thing? And yeah, that's priceless to have Soarcast Vortex at the landing location and deals 45% increased damage. Amazing. Amazing. Okay? And these boots score on the earth, you know, evades now Soar, and Soar grants barrier, and Soar deals more damage based upon how far you travel, and gives me movement speed, gives me 2 increased evade charges, and evade cooldown reduced by 0.5 seconds every time I attack an enemy. Well then, that's cool. Normally evade has a certain number of seconds, like 10 seconds or so. Okay. This weapon, the Wuxi Nakpa, it's a fancy weapon, unique weapon, and the key aspect here, or the key factor here, it says casting an ultimate skill grants or amplifies its matching Spirit Hall bonus with up to 100% potency for 15 seconds. And your ultimate skills each gain an additional skill type. The Hunter, which is what I'm using, the Hunter, is now a mobility skill. The Seeker is a focus skill. The Devourer is a potency skill. The Protector is a defensive skill. You can only have one active, or you can only have one unique skill. That's why it's only one ultimate skill. Only one ultimate skill. This item is a unique. Okay? Only one ultimate skill. That's what makes it ultimate. Okay? It's called ultimate. You see over here? Ultimate skills. Shift the tide of battle and devastate your enemies. Okay? Some key thing. Like a big gorilla shows up and starts smashing the ground. A gigantic centipede hits everything with poison. In my case, a phantom jaguar jumps and does a spiral attack, and then does it again, pretty fast. You can chain it together. Pretty powerful. And because the Hunter is now a mobility skill, that pairs well with something I'm about to show you, okay? Basically, because it's a mobility skill, I have something else to reduce the cooldown of mobility skills, but I'm able to reset the cooldown of the ultimate pretty quickly after 2 jumps. Every 2 jumps with my evade, my ultimate is reset, as opposed to waiting a full minute. You know? It's one of those minute-long abilities. But this also gives me a ton of ultimate damage, a ton of my main stat, extra supremacy, and then a bunch of other stuff. Really cool. Really good. But there's many other items I could be using. I have a whole inventory full of really cool stuff that does really cool stuff. Alright. This ring right here, it has some nice stats. Cold resistance, resist all, raw damage, main stat, vulnerable damage, a big chunk of it. It means damage to vulnerable targets. You know, you have to apply the vulnerable status to them. And I'm doing that through my evade and through some other thing with the feathers or whatever. But once they're vulnerable, I have a bunch of sources of vulnerable damage. Like on my ring, on my weapon here, I have 2 gems, and it's sapphires for vulnerable damage. The amethyst is for damage over time, and the emerald is for critical damage, and the topaz is for basic damage, and the diamond for ultimate damage. I already have over 1,000% critical damage, and you have to have a bunch from every different category. So, for example, I can't just have 2,000% critical damage and then no vulnerable damage, because the critical is based upon the vulnerable. Like, the vulnerable is before the multiplication of the critical. You know what I mean? You got the raw damage, and that's enhanced by the vulnerable status, and that's multiplied by the critical damage. So you have to have the vulnerable damage up in there. And the second you give yourself any bit, your damage skyrockets, because now all these math equations are being supplemented with a whole new factor. My goodness. Know what I mean? So, this ring here has a modification where I have it where I gave myself a couple extra charges for one of my abilities. Pretty cool. Kind of complicated out of context. And it has another line right here with vulnerable damage. Basically, for legendaries, you're able to add 2 affix lines. You can add 2 affix lines to legendary items. A whole part of the game called tempering. Over here at the blacksmith, you can add some lines. See? Tempering. You can add and modify 2 lines from a big category, potential, where you can focus on one sort of skill to enhance it and stack it up from different categories, different potentials. There's a lot of damage hidden around the proper combination. Usually something like 1 utility, 1 offense, or 1 defense, 1 utility. That's how it works. You have 2. But you can't modify these unique items, so you can't change out the legendary aspect, and you can't add affix lines, and they usually don't have as much like armor and resistances. But sometimes they do. Sometimes you have a totally defensive unique item that give you just nothing but resistances, but it's missing other key factors that you might need for your build. So you have to have a nice combination of legendary items, unique items, and mythic unique items, these purples. You know? So, this right here says, hitting a vulnerable enemy has a 32% chance to reduce my evade cooldown. Right? By 5 seconds. Every stack of ferocity I have, which is another passive effect I have that increases my attack speed, and I'm getting that through this other ability. It gives me a minimum ferocity at all times through a passive. It's just always there, and then whenever I press the button, or whenever I'm in combat, it builds up. No, it stays there, sorry. My ultimate gives me full stacks of ferocity. So every time I cast my ultimate, it gives me all the stacks I need, and then that increases my attack speed. Or, sorry, that increases the effectiveness of this cooldown by hitting a vulnerable enemy. So, basically, whenever things keep going, I can keep jumping forever. The machine is feeding itself, and I can keep going. Which is why you see me jumping so much. Without that aspect, I don't jump as much, and it stops pretty quickly. And it's pretty rough and, you know, jerky and floppy and slow. I'm hitting, jumping, hitting, running over here, hitting, jump, hit. Whatever. I still do the same thing, but I have more control over where I move. This other item has a bunch of stats that you can see, but then the key factor here is that it says, upon lucky hit, eagle skills. Certain skills are eagle skills, like my soar, the thing that's landing on them. All that weird, fluffy, white, bluish stuff is considered eagle land, except for the gorilla, which is also white. Whatever, the bluish stuff. My soar ability whenever I evade. So, eagle skills have a chance to spawn a storm feather. Each storm feather you pick up now reduces your mobility skill cooldowns by 1.7 seconds. And, like I said, my hunter skill, my ultimate, is now a mobility skill. The hunter is now mobility. Storm feathers reduce mobility cooldown. Yeah. And this other item says casting a focus skill, and, by the way, soar, that thing that jumps Happens to be a focus skill and an eagle skill, so casting a focus skill recalls all nearby storm feathers, dealing a bunch of lightning damage along the way. If there's no nearby storm feathers, the cast instead spawns 10 feathers around you. So every other jump, you're pulling in the feathers. You see? And this item increases the size of the vortex, raw damage, raw armor percentage, all sorts of mannered cool stats that are configured for the right balance. Right? You have cutoffs here. You can't be over 1,000 armor. Your resistance is up to 85, but then you could raise it higher. No higher than a certain amount, but by default 70 is the cutoff max until you have something that says your maximum resistances are raised. If it doesn't say maximum resistances, it's talking about just your resistances. So right now, without the incense, I'm at 4770, 60.485, 75. So right here it says this value is capped at your maximum. Right here it says this value is capped at your maximum resistance of 70%. Maximum resistance can be increased by various sources but cannot exceed 85%. You currently have 160.4% cold resistance from sources and minus 100% from penalties. Which means, because I'm in this high difficulty, the world itself is reducing my resistances by 100%. So now I'm below the default 70%. The 70 is the default max. But like my helmet here, it says maximum poison resistance 15%. Okay? And because of that, and because it has 666% poison resistance, it's just a joke, you know? It means I have 85, but then 70 for lightning, and then 47 fire, 60 cold, 47 shadow. So I'm using these 3 different incenses. One gives me resist all, 10%, and maximum resistance by 1%. The other one specifies fire, cold, and shadow, because with this one incense, it's not enough. You see, with that one, it's not enough to fill in the gaps. It brought them up. Now we're at 70.4 cold and 57.9 shadow, 57.9 fire. With this other one, now they're all above 70. See? It's not green because the cap is raised to 73. But this is above the old 70, so this is good. Very, very perfect. Armor is 1,274 because that incense happens to have a bit of armor on it. But hey, we're over 1,000. And that's the key. We're at or above 1,000. So that's maximum physical damage resistance of 85%. So from the resistance standpoint, from elemental, from physical and non-physical sources, it's maxed out, roughly. It'd be better if it was 85. But that's through a special item, but then never replace something else. That's if you need it. But my character has many, many, many sources of damage mitigation, and so forth and so on. Right there. And plus I'm using diamonds in my rings and amulet for resist all. Over here with the keyword search, I can look at damage reduction. You see I have a couple of sources. Damage reduction right here, whatever. Lots of stuff. The block chance, pretty high with this character. Block chance, dodge chance is pretty high. It's sort of like a monk. It has all this stuff built into it, but I have dodge and block and barrier and just physically moving out of the way and stuff like that. The Paragon board gets kind of complicated. But let me talk about my overall build here. Ravager, like I mentioned, gives me the minimum ferocity. It seems to be active and just stays active. It says that the duration is extended by 2 seconds per kill while active, and it stays the entire time. It just stays forever. You can see the it all stacked up. I don't have to press the button anymore. Once it's active and I'm in combat. Every so often I press the button, but it doesn't really do anything after it's active. That's why I like it. I don't have to press the button. Same thing over here with Armored Hide. Only really lasts for 3 seconds, okay? But it doesn't have a bunch of charges on it, so I can't do the whole spammy trick. I have a spammy trick, okay? But it does give me 100% block chance for 3 seconds. And it gives me maximum resolve. I care more about the maximum resolve versus the extra block chance. Because block chance doesn't even prevent all damage. It just reduces a certain percentage of the incoming damage. Resolve is a new stat added to Spiritborn, which increases overall damage reduction by 20%. And you hold stacks of it. So you hold 8 stacks, damage comes in, the stacks reduce. It's not like you have 160%, you have 20% 8 times. Okay? And activating this thing gives me maximum stacks, and then through some other means, I deal more damage based upon the stacks of resolve I have. Okay? And I like it because it has a passive just for being there, where I gain 1 resolve every 5 seconds. So over time I end up with maximum stacks. And I sort of maintain them. The counterattack is the thing that saves my life. I press it right before combat, you know, and it saves my life. It feels like I'm actually doing martial arts. I have to press it right before I go in, and it keeps me alive for 3 seconds. And because of that, I can lower my defense from other sources, you know, and kind of go glass cannon if I wanted to. But during serious matters, if I'm with a team in some high-level dungeon or something, if I'm doing the raid, I don't really want to be a glass cannon and be the point of failure, because in certain situations when you die, it ruins everything. It actively eats away at the timer. You lost 30 seconds from the timer because you died. Died again, 60 seconds. So I can't really, you know, risk it with other people on the line. I could risk it on my own and practice the timing and paying attention to the choreography of the enemy attacks. They sort of sit, boom, with the axe. They make it really obvious that they're about to attack, and it's really good to train up on that. If you are immortal forever, then you don't have to care, and you're just like running around with your eyes closed. But having to care is really immersive. Know what I mean? So I gotta press this button every so often. It's nice. Yeah. Yeah. And it increases my critical strike damage up to 30% based on close enemies. And what it really does, besides making me immortal, it reflects damage based upon enemies hurting me. It's almost like Thorns, because that's how Thorns works. Thorns works where if the enemy hits you, they take damage. In this one, you are not getting hit in the process. So imagine Thorns, but you don't take any damage. In Thorns, you take damage, but you have to make up the gap through life on hit, life on kill, life over time, life through some other means. Life while standing still. Something to fill in the gap. Or just have a whole lot of life. You know? And then whatever. But with this, every time you dodge, you hurt the enemy. You know? I gotta press that button all the time. Now Hunter is the ultimate attack, like I mentioned. The cool part about Hunter, it says, killing an enemy while the Hunter is present has a 40% chance to instantly reset its own cooldown. Yeah, so it's resetting itself. Plus, every time I evade twice, the feathers are coming out, or the storm feathers are coming out. Every time that the storm feathers hit the enemies, it's reducing the cooldown of the ability until it's reset. So it's always almost ready for me. So I'm jumping, using the Hunter, jumping, using my counterattack paired with the Hunter. So the key is just to always use some other ability with the Hunter, because it'll reset it. Not so much the Hunter, but any ultimate. Through these other passives down here. These are the ultimate abilities down here. And these are the passives for those ultimate abilities. And you can see right here, under Intricacy, it says, upon casting an ultimate skill, the last different potency, defense, or focus skill you cast prior is reset and can be cast for free up to 3 times for the next 5 seconds. So I can't just be spamming things. I have to kind of like keep tagging in with Hunter. That's what I'm doing. And I'm jumping in between. It's doing a bunch of this lightning damage, a bunch of the vortex damage, a bunch of the eagle damage, a bunch of jaguar damage, okay, and some other stuff. Right here with Spirit Hall, with the Spiritborn, you have a Spirit Hall selection. You can choose a primary and a secondary spirit to assign with, and they give you overall passives, and they work with your stuff. if you recall that item I had, my unique, the Wuxi Nak Pa, it says casting ultimate skill grants or amplifies its matching primary spirit hall bonus with up to 100% potency for 15 seconds. So whatever this says 15%, that doubles basically and goes up to 30%. Let's just imagine. Okay? So it says every 15th time you deal direct damage to an enemy with a Jaguar skill, you unleash an additional strike, dealing 15% up to 30% of all the damage that you've done in the last half second. And all skills are now Jaguar skills, which means if you are lucky enough to pull off a couple criticals, boom boom, and a Poison Nova, boom, and some other stuff, boom boom, within half a second, your next big hit is going to be amazing. It's going to be 16 billion damage all of a sudden. And the goal is to have that happen as much as possible by having a fast attack speed and the most number of attacks as possible. And whenever I group in a bunch of enemies, because I'm hitting so many enemies at once, that counts as different attacks, you know? And it's happening all the time. This extra big burst. And my key passive over here, it says, Noxious Resonance. Your critical strikes cause your poisoning on an enemy to burst. So that Poison Nova is not really damage over time. It's all at once. Dealing 100% of the total poisoning instantly to them and 20% to surrounding enemies. Damage is increased by 30% of your critical strike damage bonus, which is why I needed 1,000% critical strike damage, or even more. Because now it says that the damage bonus is 260%. So every so often we have this poison explosion mixed with everything else equals a lot of damage. And that's how that overall build there works. The Paragon board can be intimidating for people. I guess they've mentioned it. I've heard it from many different sources, from people in my own chat, from people in the X community for Diablo, when they're talking about why they use meta, and they said, man, the Paragon board makes my head spin, or it's just overwhelming, or I do it, I copy the meta at first, and then I make adjustments afterwards, because that Paragon board, it can be complicated if you're copying something. So if I had to duplicate this and go piece by piece, it's like you're copying something without knowing what it means. And so every little piece of the journey is weird, and you don't really understand why you're doing it. But you know it has to match that weird shape. I gotta match the shape, you know, or something weird. It's rather simple. You have these different glyph boards you can attach to each other, these Paragon boards. Each Paragon board has a name. Can't see it right now. Oh well. But every Paragon board has a legendary node that does something interesting. After moving 10 meters, you deal 3% increased damage for 10 seconds. It stacks 10 times. You know? So you basically have to attach one board to the previous board and dig a chain point by point by point. See, you can remove and add. Remove and add. It costs gold. Every time I do that, I'm spending money. You know, 731 gold every time I do that. But you know, you dig a path through to the nodes you want. All the gray stuff here, they're raw stats. Dexterity, intelligence, strength, willpower, right? The blue stuff, those are magic nodes, and they do something. 2% max life, 10% damage, 15 armor, 12.5% vulnerable damage, 3% damage reduction while you have a barrier, 3% barrier generation, raw damage, max life, resist all, you know, 2% block chance, armor, you know, critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, right? You see in how they're placed, they're typically placed within proximity of the legendary node. The not legendary node, but the glyph socket that I haven't mentioned yet. Glyph socket, you have the blue stuff, but then you have some periphery things. So basically you have a board, you have a legendary node, you have the path that connects everything, you have magic nodes that are blue, rare nodes that are yellow, and a glyph socket. around the glyph socket within radius, that red, this is a max level glyph. It has the highest radius. It overlaps more. It says for every 5 strength purchase within range, you deal more damage. So you want to populate the strength nodes to deal more damage. The mouse over a strength says 5 strength and 16.7% gorilla damage. You know? Right? This other stuff is just happens to be in here. It also has other stats mixed with it. This rare node just happens to be there. There's other glyphs that, for example, this right here enhances the magic nodes within range. There's another one that says bonus to rare nodes within range. So it's sort of a thing to use those. But there's other glyphs that do direct things. Like for every 5 dexterity, you have increased critical strike damage. You have increased jaguar damage. You have increased poison damage. Increased storm feather proficiency. I've been trying to integrate this menagerie in different ways. Pro and con. I tried to get rid of this gorilla thing, but right now it's still strong. But I think I'll be incorporating more stuff. Trial and error. You know? So it's about finding what works and what doesn't work over time. And digging to things and having enough points to dig to them and finding the correct route. See? Now, on top of the legendary node, the glyph socket, the rare and magic nodes within range of the glyph socket, you have this other periphery stuff, which you have to kind of dig out too, which could be a waste. And you might not need that. Okay? Like this other thing over here in the boonies that I'm not even digging into, or over here, off in the boonies, you see? There's some stuff out there. And I purposely dug out to here. So recently I removed myself from being a glass cannon and I dug out toward health. So I dug out and got this stuff and this node right here, you see? I could remove all that and add more damage, you see? Remove this entire branch because I just wanted to get this whole node here, and all this stuff right here is just a connecting tissue. You know? If I didn't want to go to this board, all this connective garbage can be removed, and that's a whole lot of points to be then apply over here somewhere. And the distance from the center matters. These nodes aren't just good. You see, they have this extra thing. It says another 8% damage reduction while moving if you have over 1995 dexterity. You have to meet this condition to get this other extra bonus. If you have over 400 intelligence, then you have 20% damage, you know? That's part of it. And there's different boards. There's boards I'm not using with other node effects. So you just have to look at all the boards, look at the legendary effects, look at all the rare nodes, and say which one of those match my build. I chose stuff that gave me barrier generation, extra damage with the barrier, critical damage, damage while after moving because I like to move a lot. You deal bonus damage based upon your 2 highest bonus types combined, up to 30% damage. A bunch of stacks of weird damage. When I dodge or block an attack, I gain increased attack speed and 1% increased damage for 5 seconds, stacking 9 times. And I deal increased damage. I deal 1% increased damage for every 3% of my maximum life I have as barrier. Right? All that stuff. It all works together, you see? For my current build. But there's other options out there. Other options. And that can be complicated. And the direction and rotation of these boards matter. Because you see, there's different connection points where you can branch out to different boards. I can have more than 5, but I can't. So the order matters. You see, I'm going this way. Because you see, the legendary node's way over here. I gain access to the glyph first, and then the legendary node afterwards. I can say, you know what, I don't want that. I don't need the extra life. I don't need extra movement speed. Because I could already jump. I'll just remove all of this and get nice and beefy with this other category, is what I could do. Off and on, off and on, off and on. Ever so often. Remove the entire board. Right now there's no loadout feature, which kind of sucks. As you can see, there's a lot of little... It takes time to fill out this board, you know? It'd be nice if I could just hit a button and then swap everything out. It's a lot of little points here and here. Little fine-tuned points here and there that make a world of difference. Just to barely activate something to then get amplified. You only have so many points here, you know? Lots of points. You know? Okay? And in terms of the game, I showed you have this Paragon board. I mentioned that you can level up the glyphs, you see, this is the max level, level 100, level 1, you see. You run this activity over here called the pit. It gets harder and harder and harder and harder. For example, tier 65 is equivalent to this difficulty in the game, Torment 4. Torment 4, you see right above my head, right below the map, it says Torment 4. It doesn't go beyond Torment 4 in terms of difficulty. You see right here it says, Torment 4, your armor is reduced by 1,000, your resistance is by 100, which is why it said minus 100 earlier. But you have more XP and more gold and more loot and everything. But that's as far as it goes. But if you want to fight harder enemies and get more XP, you go through the pit. Everything beyond 65 keeps on going up to 150 incrementally. I don't know what level these things are because the enemies stopped having levels with this last update. They're just stronger and stronger and stronger. And you do them to level up your glyphs. Whenever you're done with the pit, it's basically a random dungeon like the old school Nephilim Rifts. A randomized dungeon with a bunch of enemies, and you're filling up a meter as you're killing enemies, and you have a timer. It's not so much a time dungeon like the Undercity. It's just you're going through, clearing out a bunch of enemies, filling up a meter. When the meter's full, a portal appears. You step through the portal, and you fight a boss, which can be kind of hard. The extra hard boss, it has a second shadow boss that pops up doing extra weird shadow stuff. You know, like you're fighting the boss, all of a sudden there's an extra dude that shows up doing a bunch of AoE attacks in the ground that you have to dodge all of a sudden. Unless you one-shot the boss. At the end, you're able to level up. You have like 4 upgrade chances to level up things, and the percent chance of upgrade is based upon the difference between the pit difficulty and your glyph level. So if you have a glyph level 30, you want to make sure that you're doing above pit level 30. Otherwise, it'll be a very low percentage, and you don't want to do it. You know? The end for that, and that really helps out your in-game gameplay. So you're getting a bunch of XP for your character, getting a bunch of XP for your glyphs. The glyphs are powerful. You only have so many active at once, so it's kind of complicated to find the best combination. It starts to really add up quite a bit, you know. Each of these nodes is worth 16.7% critical strike damage. You know, just a few equals a whole lot, you know, give and take. But I like to have over 10,000 life. Because with 10,000 life, you can tank a heavy shot. You can tank an explosion, like once. Sort of. Or once and a half. 2 explosions. Whatever. If you have 3,000 life, most things might kill you. Like, most things that you're sort of supposed to avoid will kill you. If there's like a randomly slow-moving fireball, it'll one-shot you. It's like, whoops. A meteor that falls down like a fire meteor, boom, vaporized. It'll eat right through your shield if you have 3,000 life, because the shield matches your life. So imagine 3,000 life equals 3,000 additional barrier for 6,000 total hit points. But if you have 6,000 life, that's 6,000 plus a 6,000 barrier, which means they aren't even getting through the barrier, in theory. Or 10,000 equals they're not even getting through the barrier. You still have like 10-15% of your barrier left. They haven't even hurt you yet. A huge difference with just a few points of dedication. So there's that. But there's also, in terms of gear, there's a series of bosses across the map in certain locations. In these layers. Like this layer right here. The Gaping Crevasse. Touched air billows from a ravine. And you have these body parts, these boss summoning parts that I mentioned earlier. Like this living steel, right here. All this living steel, distilled fear, exquisite blood, mucus slick egg, shard of agony, stand scorched shackles, pincushion doll. All these different parts to then summon specific things. The exquisite blood says, used in the ancient seat within the darkened way, in the fractured peaks to summon a powerful enemy, requires 12. Found in torment difficulties from cash rewards from the Tree of Whispers, elite monsters, world bosses, and legion events. Blood Maiden, the Blood Maiden in the Helltide, the Undercity of Karast, and bartering at the Mercenary Den. It tells you where to get it. That's cool. So, specifically, there's a lot of stuff there, but it's really not that much stuff. It's world bosses. Specifically a certain kind of dungeon called the Undercity, which is the speed dungeon thing. If you specify this thing right here that says complete with attunement rank 1 or higher to earn random boss summoning items. The Tribute of Titans. Offer to the Undercity Spirit Brazier to enhance its rewards. The Undercity is a dungeon that you could modify the reward by offering a tribute at the beginning. There's different types. One for extra runes, one for extra equipment or something, one for a chance of uniques, and one for boss summoning items. So that's what it means. And the Blood Maiden is a boss that you spawn by depositing special hearts in the Helltide. This red section of the map that moves around every hour. There's a boss in here that you can spawn with 3 baneful hearts that drop off of enemies in that area. And that lady can have a chance to have that material. Okay? And world bosses like it'll have a timer appear. It'll say world boss appears in 1 hour. The whole map is notified. Everyone can go there. There's no cost. There's no summoning item. The boss will just appear, a gigantic boss. Everybody fights it. It's not a dungeon. It's just out in the wild, so you got like 20 people fighting at once. You know? World boss. And so basically, a bunch of weird hard stuff. And elite monsters. Elites are everywhere. Okay? So that's sort of why you want to hunt down elites. They're sort of sprinkled throughout the world. And every larger cluster of enemies has an elite in it, or two. You know, and they can have a variety of items, but they could also have random boss summoning items. You can have materials, gold, gem fragments, items, of course, and boss summoning items. And that it says cash rewards from the Tree of Whispers. That's that bounty item thing I'm doing across the map, getting these Grim Favor in this game. You have these different actions across the map, marked with these icons. You see, this section has it. This section does. There's nothing here. There's something here. Wow. There's nothing here. And there's something clearly here. Different icons that says complete, and there's different, requirements. Down here it says Whispers of the Dead, Grim Favor, 7 out of 10. Here is the Tree of Whispers. Down here, okay, it says Silence Whispers, marked on the map to collect Grim Favors. When 10 Grim Favors have been obtained, claim your reward. So it's like an inside-out bounty board system where you get the bounty first, and you turn it into the tree. Okay, and there's different actions are worth different amounts, and it rotates around, and there's a timer. So it gets you kind of hot and popping. Dungeons are worth 5 typically. Some things are worth 3. Most things are worth 1. Like clearing a little cellar is worth 1. Clearing a single event is worth 1. Finding a dead body and clicking on it and then killing the enemies that spawn is worth 1. When you enter an area, sometimes you have to go around. Here, I'll show you. You go around and you kill enemies, and they drop these orange motes while the Grim Favor is active. After collecting 100, they stop dropping. You deposit the 100 in this little altar, and it spawns some enemies, and you get credit at the end for 3. You can see here, if I kill these enemies, all this orange motes drop. You can see right below the mini-map, it says Harvest Highland Wilds. You see I'm getting extra credit for doing something. Out here, you can get 100 really quickly. I'm already at 55, 56, 65, 71. Really quickly without even really trying. In fact, I don't even try. I just run through the field doing other things. You're going to have 100 without even trying to pick them up. You can see right here in the mini-map, the altar is right there. And now I have 100. You see? That was really easy. I click on the altar of ripping. It's going to make some enemies spawn. And then it says harvest complete. It gives me a chunk of XP. 185,000, a little chunk of gold. And because I was at 7 out of 10, I'm now at 10 out of 10. And now all the other Tree of Whispers activities are gray on the map. You see, now they're all gray. And now I have to go down to the Tree of Whispers. Easy peasy, right? And in that, the reward box, it could have boss summoning parts in there, random items, gold, gem fragments, a bundle of XP. Okay? Is what's going to be in that box. So I go to the Tree of Whispers. It's called the Tree of Whispers because there's like a bunch of heads.
It is done.
Different this one.
And then you get this. See, I open it up. Look at all the stuff. Bunch of XP. That's the yellow things are. Bunch of items. Bunch of raw materials. A Nightmare Dungeon sigil. You know? And even more items, more items, more items. Another Nightmare Dungeon sigil thing. Bunch of materials. And a Undercity key. Tribute of Harmony. 2 boss summoning parts. A rune. And a another Undercity modifier. You see it says offer to the Undercity Spirit Brazier to earn runes at completion. This is a Nightmare Dungeon. You see, I got a bunch of stuff for doing that. That was awesome. But that is sort of the course of the gameplay. Doing a bunch of those Tree of Whispers in different parts of the map. Do whatever you want. Whatever order. But I think the backbone is to always do that. Because that gives you boss summoning parts, it gives you dungeon access key things, sigils, and just a nice little chunk of XP every so often, money, and so forth. And it's not hard to do, and typically there is going to be a Tree of Whispers version of whatever you really want to do. Many parts of the map have it active, and it rotates around. Basically, if you're going to be doing the Helltide, you might as well do it over here, not so much down here, but over here because there's a tree giving you credit for what you're already doing. Open up 3 boxes in the Helltide. Play 75 of a specific enemy in the Helltide. Kill the Blood Maiden in the Helltide. And slay 5 Harbingers that spawn in the Helltide. All that stuff happens on this side as well, but you're not getting credit for it. So you're doing that. Yeah. The Helltide special thing that appears every so often. I'll show you. Again, higher monster density, but and demons appear with extra fire hazards. Enemies are a bit harder. There's a boss that spawns, like I mentioned. But all the enemies are dropping this currency called Aberrant Cinders. And the Aberrant Cinders are used to open up these treasure boxes. And when you're in the zone, you can see... a second. You can see there's these treasure boxes. Yeah. There's these treasure boxes. Trying to show you the map. I knew that was going to happen. These. You see, it shows you there's a weapon box, there's an armor box, but there's usually one good box. Like this right here, it's orange. It has a lot more stuff than the other boxes. The boxes cost between 75 and 100 and 250. Okay? And you earn a bunch of cinders from these enemies. Every time that you die in the Helltide, you lose half of your cinders. Only time that death matters in this game, besides hardcore mode. But I just, started here. Doesn't matter. So if you fight a bunch of stuff and don't spend your cinders, then if you die, you'll lose a whole lot. Also, you lose your cinders whenever the Helltide's over. And it rotates. So right now, this Helltide has, I think, 13 more minutes remaining. See? Once the 13 minutes is up, it says slay foes and complete activities to collect aberrant cinders and use them to unlock the tortured gifts. Once the time's up, you lose your cinders. And the zone becomes normal. Right now, it's raining blood. It's raining blood and everything. And the map is red. There's extra stuff going on. Enemies are coming in. All the plants change. You have these extra little containers here and there with extra cinders. All those little slivers that are dropping on the ground are cinders. This is a higher concentration of demons. You have this aggro meter that builds up, extra monsters spawn. But you're really doing this to open up these boxes here. I'm just going to go ahead and open up one box. Just as a demonstration. Here. There you go. I'm at 42. Extra weird mats that appear. Alright. We go around the block here. Up and around the bend. Get these plants as I travel. We're at 68 out of 75. Here. 71. 72. 74. 75. Open the box. See, I get a nice chunk of XP. And it drops a bunch of stuff here. But you see, I'm getting this living steel. This living steel is a boss summoning part. You see, this right here, it says all the same stuff as the other stuff. You know, it says elite monsters, the Undercity of Karast, world bosses, blah blah blah. But it's specifically from the Helltide. All of the boxes have different amounts of tortured steel, or sorry, living steel. And you use the living steel to spawn a boss in this game. So that's what the end game is sort of wrapped around, getting these boss summoning parts to then farm these end game bosses that drop the really good mythic items. These really good purple items that are game changing in theory if you get the right one. This helmet here and this chest, you know, I have a collection of them growing from these world bosses. This, and this. You know? Interesting stuff. Amazing things. The 90% resist all, and whatever things happen. While at full life, your skills unleash a Divine Barrage. That's cool. Divine Barrage? Like a shrine? Yes. So you have the pit to level up your glyphs. You have the Tree of Whispers and other activities to get all manner of things that govern everything in the background. The pit could even be a grim favor for the Tree of Whispers. You have the Undercity thing, which is like a weird, super special speed dungeon to get specific resources at the end based upon depositing a tribute at the beginning. Get the tributes by doing different things. Bosses typically drop tributes sometimes. Okay? You also have the need to level up your gear. You can masterwork your gear with this stuff called Obducite. Once you get a good piece of gear, you can make it better. See these little stars under the item? These stars, it says Masterwork 12 out of 12. It costs this stuff called Obducite. You get it from Nightmare Dungeons, which is activated with this sigil sort of thing like this. Do you want to consume this to activate a dungeon? Good job, you've activated a Nightmare Dungeon. Click on the map to enter the Nightmare Dungeon. You are now entering the Nightmare Dungeon. Okay? And I'm in a dungeon. The special modified dungeon I used a key for. I could have just walked to this spot. You see, this is a spot on the map I could have walked toward. Boom. But this is a special one that has more gold find. But the enemies have this Stormbane Wrath. Or get this electric effect. Once I start moving, this thing is going to start shocking me in a radius. You know? Like that. Okay. So you have Nightmare Dungeons. You do them because the random enemies drop Obducite. Plus there could be an XP shrine inside. And you have this raid thing called the Dark Citadel is pretty hard. It requires with other people. Hard because of the mechanics, and because it's hard. But the mechanics. It's a one-shotting situation with these stacks that build up that kill you whenever it's filled up if you don't do the right thing within a certain amount of time. Step on the pedestal, pick up the thing, click on that totem, that whole thing. People go through the portal, you guys stay here, kill that boss, drag that thing over here, stop that dude from absorbing those souls. All those actions. I say, different parts of the map you can go to, fun times, Undercity, do whatever you want, lots of activity, and you're trying to build it up through a variety of means. And certain things cost a lot of money. Let me show you a couple more things. Okay? I'm trying to show you the entire game. Of course, there's a campaign. That's really good. And a bajillion side quests. But, right here, you're able to re-roll a specific affix line. With Legendary, you can re-roll an affix line, and you can add 2 affix lines. You can re-roll a line, and then you can try to roll for 2 new affix lines. Then you could masterwork the gear, and all of that costs gold. You can re-roll something forever with the enchanting process, where you re-roll 1 line, but it costs more and more and more gold, until it costs millions of gold. Millions. Like right now this says whatever percentage dexterity. I can re-roll this. But it's good the way it is though. What if I re-roll something else? This says 1.3 million. I was trying to roll for something better. This right here says 2.7 million. So every time I roll this, you get a better percentage than 81.6 for vulnerable damage, because it could go up to 85. I'll do it 1 time. Boom. You see? I could go for critical strike damage or vulnerable damage, but I'll do no change. It still costs money, even though I didn't change it. 2.7 million. Tempering is more permanent. You only have a certain number of tempering charges, and then you have to consume something to reset the tempering charges. But once you do that 1 time, you can't do it again. The item is lost and done. It's locked in. So eventually you have to completely replace it and get a much better version of that same item over time. And in my box here, I have all these other unique items that have all these greater affix lines. Like one good version of everything. And right here we have secondary versions, just in case I ever feel like trading one day. Or in case I mess up. And these are all good legendary items with 1 greater affix line plus 1 perfect stat or 2 greater affix lines. So only if it has 1 greater affix line and a perfect stat or 2 greater affix lines, which are max rolled. And I just re-roll the 3rd, like big old chunk of life and main stat. You know? There's a bunch of that stuff. You know what I mean? And now there's a party finder system, so you can just open this up, find a party. There's different activities going on. Boss fights, the Undercity, the raid thing that I mentioned. There's also this horde activity, which is sort of like a 1 room, like a large room, but 1 room larger than a cellar with a bunch of enemies that spawn over the course of up to 10 waves. And in between each wave, you modify the conditions of the future waves to obtain potentially more of a certain resource that you then spend at the end on one of several rewards. You're trying to get a bunch of these materials that drop from completing certain actions in the horde activity. And these activities, or these horde events, or these ether events is what they're called. You're trying to collect ether, AE, ether, from this horde activity, okay? And as you kill the enemies, it spawns the ether events, which could be destroy this mound, or kill enemies within this circle, or kill that specific large enemy, or basically stuff like that. Destroy the mound, kill the enemy that spawns, kill the other enemy that spawns, kill the enemies in the circle, that whole a situation, but it's just to fill up with a ton of bad guys in a small room, so it's really efficient if you want to play with other people and just grind through. It gives you either a gigantic chunk of Obducite and gems, or some gear or a chunk of gold. It's an alternative to the super speed dungeon, which is the Undercity, and the average speed dungeon, which is the pit. You know, the pit is a speed dungeon, but the whole point of because it has a timer, and you're trying to reach the clock, filling up a meter, you see. But the Undercity, it has a timer that has a much shorter time frame, and there's enemies that you kill within the dungeon that give you more time. They have an hourglass next to their face, and it's really obvious. There's structures that you destroy that give you more time. You know what I mean? And your goal is to fill up a meter. You give yourself better rewards at the end. So if you're super, super, super fast, you'll get reward tier 1 out of 4. You have to be fast and thorough. Fast and thorough. With the pit, it doesn't really matter where you go as long as you kill something to fill up the meter, with elites giving you more. Here, you're killing things to fill up the meter, but your goal is to click on these braziers that once activated spawn enemies. You kill the enemies, it gives you a big chunk to fill up the meter. It's almost like before you had to kill the elites in the Nephilim Rift in the past to collect a resource that then fills up the meter. Now that doesn't happen in the pit. You just keep on going through without collecting anything. There's no loot whatsoever in the Horde, Undercity, or the pit. But there is loot in a Nephilim Rift. Sorry, in a Nightmare Dungeon. There's loot at the end of those other activities, but there's loot all through the dungeon for a Nightmare Dungeon, which feels more like the authentic game. And the monster density of this game is pretty darn nice out here in the Outworld. So just doing stuff out in the wild feels like a dungeon sometimes, especially since there are different themes for the dungeon, including outdoor themed dungeons. So if you're just watching this stream, you can't really tell if I'm in a dungeon or if I'm in the Outworld unless you read the stuff next to my face. It'll say dungeon maybe, and the map will be all black and the music will be slightly different. But like over here, it's pretty dense. If you're completing the Tree of Whispers through area, it'd be like elites everywhere, just constant rows of monsters everywhere, dense. You know what I mean? That's nice. And there's a bunch of plants everywhere, and you sort of need a bunch of these bundled herbs to make incense. This game has incense and elixirs. You see? Elixirs for lucky hit chance, or specific elemental resistances, like an extra big chunk, or overpower vulnerable damage, or armor, or critical hit chance. You see? But I use the one for extra life sometimes, or lucky hit chance attack speed. And then for incense, there's stuff for different resistances, stuff for different stats, and armor and life, basically. So there's 3 different tiers. So you have 3 different incenses active at once, and they give you XP. So XP from the incense, XP from the elixir, and XP from this other thing that you do, which I'll explain just a second. But I'm just trying to explain that this is a big part of the gameplay, to get these resources needed to make the incense. Some builds need it, like my current build needs it, World in Torment 4, to fill in the gaps of my resistances. Otherwise it's dangerous. And everything. Okay? And, yeah. Different resources you have to grind for, a bunch of plants. I'm just trying to say, that's why it's nice to go through the field, because as you're running around, there's plants everywhere. And you can sort of use the plants as a guidepost, or, you know, say, well, there's no plants here, I gotta move on. Look, there's plants over there. You start stitching around across the street. And with my mercenary here, I have a mercenary, you see. He has a passive effect where he's marking the plants. And I need the plants for incense, and there's a whole lot of gameplay. You see on the minimap all these little white spots right here. And right here. And right here. And then out in the field, there's a bunch of just on top of this, the Tree of Whispers. There's also like cellars and events. Cellars are like mini events, you say. But you have a loading screen. You go into a room, you complete something, you kill some enemies, and it's over. But these cellars give you extra supplies, like a little bundle of like little different mats and so forth. And this other currency called Opals that you get from these activities that are used at the gambling vendor, where you could hope to get something random and it could be good. You know? It could be good. Maybe. But I think I've reached beyond the point where it could be good because my items are really nice now. Now I buy the items from the purveyor of curiosities because I'll hit the limit. And you never know. I keep looking for another ring that could have a greater affix line for health. And I make a bunch of them. You know. But that currency I'm using to buy that comes from sellers and events. If you ever see me stop and do a weird little event and it says event complete, I'm getting a bundle of Opals at the end, which is used at that vendor. You know? On top of that, with this new season, we have something called the Realmwaker. And you see it's right here at the top of the map. It says Realmwaker active in 4 minutes and 43 seconds. And this section of the map, it has the Realmwaker right there. It says, the Realmwaker comes to spread hatred throughout Sanctuary. Cull the beast and prevent it from sowing seeds across our lands. It's going to be marching nice and slowly in a big circle. And then it'll stop around here somewhere. And while it marches, a bunch of enemies spawn around it. And as you kill the enemies around it, it gets it weakened so that once it stops, you then finish it off. And once it finishes off, it'll open up a portal. Go into the portal. It's a small sort of dungeon thing that contains a bunch of other little tiny dungeons, like single room things. And you get a bunch of little loot. There's a shrine in there. There's a couple of chests. But the key factor is, halfway through the dungeon, you go through a portal. And at the portal, you specify the future rewards. You specify the kind of opal you want. The seething opal of socketables. Right? Runes and gem fragments. The seething opal of equipment. Of gold. Seething opal of materials. And the seething opal of torment. Which makes the enemies drop boss mats. It says right here, enemies routinely drop additional equipment for the next half an hour. And you gain 15% extra XP. That's cool. Only one active at a time. So you complete this new Realmwalker activity to stockpile these different opals. If you're ever doing a boss farm, you want to make sure that the equipment opal is active. I like to use the torment opal in between so that I have more of these boss summoning parts here and there. The gold opal is nice just for some average nice gold income. But there's other ways to get gold. So that's just one more thing you can do here on the in-game journey to get stronger. Specific bosses here, these layer bosses that you spawn with these materials, they drop predictable items. Like this boss drops these 8 items, or these 7 items, these gloves, this chest, that weapon, and some only if you are of that class. They'll drop, certain things. So, for example, these gloves, the Fists of Fate, drop from drop from the Beast in the Ice. So if I want better versions with a better percentage and maybe a third or whatever affix line, I have to keep fighting that boss, which means I have to have a bunch of distilled fear to spawn him, and that comes through a variety of means. Doing the Tree of Whispers, completing a bajillion different activities, killing treasure goblins, doing the Undercity with the Druid of Titans on it, and so forth and so on. If I ever happen to find myself an XP shrine within a Nightmare dungeon, I go ahead and do the pit, because the pit is all about leveling up. Because you can make the damage higher, and I do it with a team, full team for more people and more XP, and if I'm going to have the XP buff, I'll go ahead and do the pit, And like I said, the Nightmare Dungeon has Obducite, but that's a reason to do the Nightmare Dungeon every so often, or any dungeon really, because it could give you an XP buff that lasts for an hour. There's an XP shrine inside of a dungeon that lasts for an hour. Super rare. Get it? You tell your friends. You get the buff. It lasts for an hour. You go to another dungeon, find another buff. It stacks on top of the first one, so now it lasts for like an hour and a half. Very cool. A bunch of stuff to do. Okay. Fine tuning to match whatever you want to do. There's different classes. Lots of fun. And it's fun playing with other people. There's generally some sort of meta build that people are duplicating. Get really powerful. And there's a batch of people that are super duper duper powerful compared to everybody else. You know what I mean? I tend to not do that. But you're around these people all the time. It's sort of like in Fallout 76 with people using legacy weapons. You know? But yeah, there's the game. This last update, the Vessel of Hatred added this whole lower area. And the Spiritborn class. And the seasonal thing has this Realmwaker. And a reputation turn in. I'm sure I've left out a couple things from my little narrative, but you know, there's side quest, main quest. You get credit for doing different things. It's very fulfilling. As you're playing the quest, you're digging through. You get credit for discovering stuff. You get extra total skill points, extra total Paragon points that last forever for all of your characters. That's cool. Finding little hidden things in the bushes here and there. You know, as you're exploring. And yeah. The end. Yeah. And it's like a science project. Slowly creeping forward, getting a variety of things. Most of the time I'm not worried about XP because it's so slow incoming. I'm worried about getting all my other resources up and running. The gem fragments, the rawhide and iron ore, the gold, the other legendary materials, whatever. That sort of stuff, the boss summoning parts in particular. And then you gotta do a bunch of boss summons in a row. You don't gotta pay for your own, you can just be with other people, but it's nice to be able to pay for it. As opposed to mooching. But it works. Eventually you get something good. And so now that we've come full cycle, they've also added these runes. Different rune word combinations, like I mentioned earlier. You have a ritual and invocation rune. They work in pairs. 2 runes together. One rune generates resources of some variety, of imaginary variety. This ritual stuff, you know. And then the other invocation rune requires, you know, the expenditure of the staff. You get a certain amount of this ritual resource for doing certain things. I'll show you specifically. Here's all my runes. For example, you have this ritual thing. It says gain 50 offering after traveling 5 meters. Or gain 50 offering while casting the same non-channel skill 3 times in a row. Gain 200 offering for drinking a spirit potion. A health potion. Gain 150 offering for casting an ultimate skill. Whatever. Requires 300 offering to invoke a skill. Requires 600 offering to do this crazy stuff with turning invisible. Requires 200 for this, and so forth and so on. And you get those runes randomly from elites and whatnot across the map. You also get them by using that tribute undercity that I mentioned earlier. Right here, it says you... Right here. The Tribute of Harmony. It says you complete the Undercity with a achievement rank 1 or higher to earn runes. You get a handful. You do it again. Really quickly. Over and over and over again. Or you just play the game and hope that enemies drop runes. Because they do. Or they appear in treasure chests. Just randomly. After a boss fight, typically. Like, all these lair bosses drop a rune as well. After farming a boss a bunch of times, you're going to have this tab full of runes. Is what happens. And then I have a whole lot here. 19, 14, 14, 28, 35. A whole lot of them. You're also able to combine 3 of the same tier to make another random of the same tier, including itself. So you can generate new. You have more of the same of same tier. It's a whole strategy, okay, to work with these runes. And I'm saying this for a reason. I'm almost done with my speech here. I'm explaining how Diablo 4 works, okay? The end game here, sort of, but not really end game, is to farm these world bosses. And like I mentioned, you have to have the boss summoning parts by doing a bunch of different stuff to get these parts. You farm the bosses, you get these mythics. The mythics that you don't need, you break down, they turn into these resplendent sparks. You can then take the resplendent sparks at the blacksmith to forge a random mythic unique. But it costs 50 million gold for a random mythic unique. It could be a good one. It could be one that you haven't had before. It could be one that has multiple greater affixes. Or you go to the jewel crafter and you craft a specific mythic unique. A specific one. If you want something you don't got yet. Man, I really want that. I gotta have that. Do I have everything? I have everything. I think I do. Let's just imagine I didn't have the Air of Perdition. I need this Air of Perdition. Oh boy. That means I'll need 2 sparks and only 5,000 gold as opposed to 5 million. But 6 of these other runes. Ja, Q, and Gar. You know? I'm trying to make a new version of my current chest. Perhaps. You know? It requires back, Cry, and Moni. Which happens to be a legendary, rare, and magic rune combination. So 6 legendary, 6 magic, and 6 rare. Plus 2 sparks. So that means you have to grind for a bunch of these runes. And some of them are more rare than others. And they are tradable and sellable. You see? So if you are farming bosses all day, you're going to end up with a bunch of random runes. Maybe, just maybe, you can make one. The odds of you being able to make more than one item is low. Do you really have 16 of the same legendary rune, or do you have just enough to make 1 because you have 6? Or do you have 5 and now you have to work hard to get the final one? If you only have 5, it's kind of hard to get the final one, sort of. That means that you have to break down a bunch of other legendary runes, hoping to get that one. Or just keep your eyes open. Or farm a bunch of bosses. Or you use the Opal of... right here? No, not that one. Yeah, this one. The Seething Opal of Socketables, and you farm some enemies, and you hope for a bunch of runes at the end. Over time, you'll get what you want. You know? And that is sort of the end game, little grindy poo, along with pushing deeper and deeper and deeper into the pit, which is more of a benchmark. You know? You already know what you can do. It's just a machine just churning through really quickly, killing enemies, and then you kill the boss, and then it's done. You do it again. As opposed to having to perform a series of actions across the map. There's also, for the end game, the new raid, like I keep mentioning, the Dark Citadel, which has, I think, 3 different wings in the final boss, or is it 2 wings in the final boss? I don't know. There's like 3 different raids in one. That counts. You complete 1 wing, good job, you're done. Now do the second one. Good job, you're done. Now do the third one, and get the head and mount it on the thing. Now you're done for this week. You get some weekly benefit for doing it. You see, and it's hard, sort of, and there's mechanics. If you mess up, everybody dies. Lots of pressure. Pressure. You know? That's what it's all about. Any questions? That's nice. You can see all your different resources here. You can see individual stats. Right here. Offensive. It shows me all my different stuff in detail. Defensive, whatever. It's just, I guess the game is lacking a hardcore, it's lacking a PvP mode, like Battlegrounds. Okay? And there's no like guild hall feature like in Diablo Immortal. That whole thing is not in this game. This game has a bunch of other stuff that I showed you that isn't in Diablo Immortal. You know what I mean? But basically, they're giving you lots of reasons to play the actual game across the map with this nice long-term growth structure. Before the season, it would end at 100, sort of, and you keep on just trying to get stronger with the pit at 150, get better gear slowly by farming these bosses. But now it's a lot easier for everything with this party finder system, and you know, yeah. Okay. Well, that being said, now I can play the game. I had to get that out of the way. Every so often I have to explain what's going on. Okay? Now I'm going to shut my mouth. You'll see what I'm working toward. In terms of my short and long-term goals here, I'm trying to, of course, get level 300, which is the cap. Eventually I'll be making a new sorcerer or something. I was going to make a druid, but somebody on the internet posted some build that sounds a lot like what I was going to do, and it feels too similar to what I was going to do for me to do it now. I was going to do something involving the wrath of nature and throwing boulders around. Okay? Sorry, you were on mute. I was on mute the whole time? I was on mute the whole time? Well, I'll be. Yeah, so I'm trying to hit level 300. It's going to take a long time. You know, I'm trying to replace all my gear, of course, but that takes a long time as well. And it really is just a random thing. And I'm trying to get exposed to as much gear as possible. It really is just random, you know. Trying to knock up the Tree of Whispers, get the Opals, go through that thing to get a bunch of rings until it gets better. Because my rings are pretty good, you know. And keep on doing it. Get the boss body parts. Every so often do a nice grindy poo with the bosses and whatever. Trying to get these better mythic items. Really just trying to get a bunch of these sparks at this point. But I just realized that I have all the items. All the items that were listed over there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 9, including what I'm wearing. For the head. A lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What?
Stars guide you.
Well, that part's done. And now we just have to get better versions of everything. I'm sure there's some awesome combination of these items that will help me out. Poking and prodding. Okay. Alright, well, I'll be right back. I hope you're having a great Halloween. Eat some Reese's Pieces for me. Eat some Reese's Pieces for me. Please. I'll be right back.